It's The Call with Nancy Sabato with my guest, Christina Stanton. She's telling her story of what happened September 11th, 2001 to the Twin Towers.
My husband and I lived in an apartment building that was 6 blocks away from the Twin Towers. And we had just moved there. We'd only moved there since, I believe it was July the 7th. And we were newlyweds. That was our first newlywed apartment. We were all excited. Our stuff was still in boxes. And we had this wonderful apartment. It was on the 24th floor of this interesting Art Deco building. And I just thought that the sky was the limit for us. We had this 300 square foot terrace that overlooked the World Trade Center and the Twin Towers. And I would go there and think, I am on the top of the world, literally. And it's fantastic. So on that morning of 9/11, my husband came and shook me awake. I was still asleep and said, something's happened. Something's happened. Let's go out into the terrace. We ran to the terrace, and it was just a shock to the senses, everything that we were seeing and hearing. And for one thing, I could hear a huge amount of noise. Normally, we didn't hear noise from that 24th floor, but people were collectively screaming so loud and running across the 6-lane highway, the West Side Highway, to get away from the devastation. They were running over car roofs, and I'd never seen anything like that. There were sirens of police cars and ambulances racing up the West Side Highway. I remember thinking, it's just so loud. And then, of course, right in front of us was the North Tower that was on fire. And it was a shocking scene. I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't make any particular phone calls, didn't talk to anybody. I don't remember us talking to each other. It's just like we were watching some horror movie on TV, this panoramic TV, on a beautiful day as a backdrop. And then all of a sudden, over our right-hand shoulder, the second plane came and went over our heads and swooped right in front of us. And it turned what I call an 8 o'clock and 2 o'clock and went into the South Tower. And my husband, by the way, has done the math and says that plane was only 500 feet above us. And to talk about loud, I mean, it really just, it roared over us. But the shock waves from that plane moving so fast and the explosion being just so devastating actually blew us back into our apartment and knocked me out on the floor.
Wow.
And part of the blessing of that was we had left our doors open to this terrace, or that would have caused us a lot more damage. But I was on our living room floor. One moment I was on our terrace, the next moment I was on the floor with my 40-pound Boston Terrier jumping on my torso. And that's really what woke me up. And I remember my husband yelling different things. I couldn't discern what he was saying, but I did make out him asking if I needed my shoes. And I just hopped up and started running. I was in a complete panic. So I ran down the 24 flights. He grabbed the dog. He ran behind me. As soon as I got outside, I'd had like 24 flights to collect myself. And I realized I'm in my pajamas. I have no shoes. As soon as Brian and Gabriel got down, I said, we've got to go back to our apartment. Let's do a do-over here. We'll evacuate. I just need to put on some clothes. They wouldn't let us in, actually. And they said, I'm so sorry, Christina, but we're just evacuating only. So I ended up wearing my husband's socks. He had these thick socks. And and I realized nobody cares what I'm wearing or not wearing. And everybody was in different states of dress anyway. So of course, we needed to go as far away from the danger as possible. And for us, that meant Battery Park. So a lot of people aren't familiar with, the southern tip of Manhattan gets very narrow and it ends in a 25-acre park. So for us, that was as far away as we could go when we ran out of land, meaning it was surrounded on 3 sides by the East River, the Hudson, the New York Harbor. But we felt safe there. We just were completely in shock. There were thousands of us there. Everybody was crying and holding things over their heads because there was flying debris and flying papers. And my husband and I found a bench and sat down trying to collect ourselves with our dog when all of a sudden the ground started shaking. And we didn't know what it was. Why is the ground shaking? My first thought was a plane might have gone nose down into the ground somewhere. But of course, we realized all at the same time that one of the towers was coming down. And, I didn't see the tower come down. And some people have asked me, well, Did you not see it because you were too far away? And it was actually the opposite. We were too close because the dust kicked up in the air completely, utterly, and immediately. So it obscured the sky. We couldn't see anything within seconds because all of a sudden everything became complete, a snow globe dust blob. And so we thought that the tower that was still rumbling down was going to fall on us because, if the towers did fall lengthwise, it could have reached us in the park. And we were all very aware of that. And meanwhile, we also couldn't breathe. We were completely surrounded, not just by the dust and debris, but by smoke. I mean, the wind carried the smoke from the fires straight down, straight south. And we were in that line of fire. And we saw people pitch themselves into the New York harbor trying to swim to nearby Governor's Island. Not so nearby, but they tried to do it. And we just saw all these people reacting when they think they're going to die is more of what I remember more than my feelings myself. And it was a terrible, horrible scene that's kind of worse than any horror movie that you could ever imagine. And we all thought we were going to be asphyxiated. And so at one point, my husband, I asked him, I said, are we going to die? And he said, maybe. And he grew up Catholic. I remember him grabbing my hands and praying the Lord's Prayer. And I remember looking at him. He had his eyes bowed and his head bowed and his eyes closed, but I didn't. I remember looking at him thinking, I'm just so glad that I'm with him. All these thousands of people who are thinking that they're going to die are without their loved ones. They can't even call them to say goodbye because nobody's cell phone was working. And yet I'm here with my newlywed husband. I'm just so glad that I'm with him. But then the other thought was, well, so what happens now? Like, where are we going? What's this? Are we going to go to an afterlife? And what's that going to look like? And it was a lonely, sad moment. It was glad to be with my husband. Very sad that the end of the road was about to happen because I was like, I'm 31, my husband's 35, we're newlyweds. I didn't do anything I wanted to do. And anything I ever wanted to do isn't going to help me right now. Nothing can help me right now. The one thing that probably could, God, to give me comfort or some kind of assurance, I don't have. And I was very, very aware of that. But we were evacuated on a boat, rescued by boat, and dropped in New Jersey. And Paula's Hook, I remember. And we walked to a BJ's wholesale club in Newport, Pavonia, and got something to eat and drink, but didn't get back into our apartment for 2 more weeks. We were displaced because we lived too close to the attack zone. And then meanwhile, our dog almost died. He had licked that dust that covered him, which contained ground up glass, which shredded his insides. My husband found out a good friend died in the North Tower. We were unemployed instantly, suffering from PTSD symptoms right away. It was a dark time, and it just went on and on and on, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I live in New Jersey, and we did see day and night smoke. We saw the lights coming up from the Twin Towers. You could see it at night, the smoke of it too. And then during the day, you could still see the smoke, and it went on for, I think, a while, the smoke. And,
well, the fires, the last fire was put out 90 days after 9/11, well into December. And a lot of people don't know that. I mean, fires were raging for months.
Yeah. And I remember afterwards, the Tribeca Film Festival they tried to resurrect New York City after that, and it was dead. New York City was dead.
Yeah.
And how was New York? How did you see New York City affected after this?
So this, immediately after, absolutely, the city was a funeral. It was completely in mourning. I remember going by and seeing lines and lines of people actually lined up to give blood. People were opening their wallets. People were taking donations to like the Salvation Army and Goodwill. Everybody was just so very upset, and there was really nothing that they could do. People wanted to do something, and there was nothing to do. But I just remember the sense of altruism and the sense of camaraderie. Strangers were hugging each other in the street. There were vases of flowers and candles everywhere. There were memorials all over the city. People were gathering in parks like Union Square and Tompkins Square Park. And I remember there were so many ways that people were mourning communally that I thought in a way
Mm.
was just beautiful. I had never
Mhm.
seen the city react that way. Again, strangers hugging
Mhm.
strangers in the street. But
Mhm.
there were there were not harder, but hard times were to come, because remember, the fall in the city was awful. So not only was 9/11 awful, and the city was just cast in this huge spate of mourning, but I mean, it went on and on. There, the anthrax scare, that hit New York, scaring everybody. You remember the plane went down in Queens, killing, I think it was 250,000. Was one of the worst aviation disasters in U.S. history, and it happened, I think, 2 months, almost to the day, if I remember correctly. But it was either a month or 2 months,
Mhm.
almost to the day. I think it was November the 12th. Um, but it's I that's pretty accurate. But it was, people could not imagine that it was not related to 9/11, and it was just a horrible other plane disaster that happened
Mhm.
again in New York City, killed
Mhm.
people on the ground as well.
Mhm.
And the Richard Reed goes on with a bomb in his shoe, and it just seemed like the world was coming down.
Yeah.
Operation Enduring Freedom, a war started. It just
Yeah.
really seemed like the end times were coming. But I wrote about Out of the Shadow of 9/11 15 years after 9/11 happened, because it took me that long to gain some perspective, and also it took that long from our relationship to Christ, which began after 9/11, to come to fruition, and to look down that road 15 years later and see how God had brought me from point A to point Z. And that's really what the book is about.
Mhm. To get the book Out of the Shadow of 911, go to ChristinaRayStanton.com. Head on over to our YouTube channel, The Call with Nancy Sabato, or on podcasts with Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and many more. And may the Lord Jesus Christ richly bless you.